Hello fellow makeup lovers, how are you guys doing today? So I'm super excited for this video because we're going to be doing another no drama dupes, and today we're going to be discussing the new Jeffree Star x Shane Dawson collaboration, and specifically the Conspiracy palette, which I'm going to go ahead and leave some pictures on screen of what the Conspiracy palette looks like in case you haven't seen it already. So this is a collaboration that I believe is launching November 1st, and I like to do videos like this. And the whole point of the video is not to cause a stir or anything. It's just that I like to be able to provide dupes for anyone who wants to buy a product, but they don't want to buy it for a reason other than the makeup. So if you're not comfortable supporting Shane, if you're not comfortable supporting Jeffree, if you're not comfortable, if you don't like conspiracy things, and that's like a red flag for you. I don't know, whatever it may be, whatever your reasoning is, I like to be able to provide dupes. So that's the whole point of No Drama Dupes, which was a name submitted by a subscriber that I absolutely love. I feel like it's super catchy and cute. So that's the whole point. It's not like adding cancel culture. I'm not up here on my throne judging anyone and what they're purchasing. I'm not going to be buying the palette personally, but I do think that it seems like there was a little heart put into it, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion. This is just focusing on the colors and duping the shadows as best I possibly can with my own collection. They're not 100% going to be perfect identical dupes because I don't own the Conspiracy palette to begin with, so everything I was doing was based off of looking at all the different lighting and the swatches from earlier videos, and some of the palette pictures that I have that were really clear had a white background, and then some of them have a black background. Some are professional lighting, some are just like lighting in a room. So I kind of tried to take all of that into account and do the best I possibly could. So here's what my version looks like, and I just really hope that this video will be able to be helpful for anyone, like I said, who doesn't want to purchase the palette, or just in general if you're looking for a Shop My Stash and you were looking for a dupe for just one or two particular shades. Hopefully I can give you a good alternative. If you've been following along with the what is it called, The Beautiful Life of Jeffree Star, the series that Shane Dawson is doing right now surrounding the collaboration in the beauty community, they have been showing the process of putting the colors together, and they went ahead and did some like quick market research, and this woman came over, she looked at the shades, she told them what she liked, what she didn't like, and they ended up taking this beautiful green shadow out. And even though I didn't plan on buying the collaboration, my heart was like, what the heck? Like, why are you going to take out the green shadow? Like, what's wrong with you? Not that there's anything actually wrong with her, it's just that I'm such a green lover. I'm like all about the greens, more green. So I had a feeling I could dupe that shade, and I went through all of my green shadows and I found a perfect dupe, like literally so spot on. Such an amazing formula. It's one of my favorite metallic formulas, so I feel really good about that. So I figured I would also share this shadow with y'all today in case your heart also broke a little bit when that green shadow got removed. I wasn't even buying it and I'm upset. Like, what's wrong with me? Alright, so sorry for the heavy disclaimered intro. I try not to do that often, but I know with these videos sometimes I can just accidentally end up rubbing people the wrong way, so I just wanted to get that off my chest really quickly. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. So I'm just going to go ahead and talk about each shade one by one, swatch them out, tell you why I chose this shade, if they're super similar, or the differences that I can personally see. I did stretch it a little bit for some shades just because I feel like for me and my collection it's pretty easy to dupe colors, but then when it comes to neutral shades, specifically like certain golds and silvers, especially silvers, I have barely any silvers, it's hard for me to get like something that is 100% accurately duping another silver shade because I just don't own that much. I really need to just do like for my YouTube single shadow order and order a bunch of neutrals for when I do videos like this. But for the most part, every single time I make an order, I'm like pinks and greens and purples and blues, and the neutrals just, they don't happen. All of my neutrals are from like years ago, like the oldest shadows in my single shadow collection. So that's what we're going to do to start off with. And then at the end of the video, I did film this look using this palette. So if you're curious to see a quick little demo and see how I got this look, that'll be just at the very end of this video. So let's go ahead and jump on in. I'm just going to start off with that single green shade just to get it out of the way really quickly. So this is the shade Venice from Emme Cosmetics, EMME. They're a really cool small indie brand in Canada, and they make amazing metallics. So this shade is pretty much like the exact same as the one that was taken out of the palette. So I'm just going to go ahead and swatch it. I feel like looking on my monitor, it is pulling a little bit blue, but in real life, in person, it is a very green shadow with just a tiny little shift of like golden like just a little touch of gold to it. It's not even a shift really. It's one of the most beautiful shades. So if you were a little devastated about that shade, there you go. Venice. So the first shade in the Conspiracy palette is Ranch, which is like a true metallic white shade. So I chose Duchess from Kitten Cosmetics, which is also a very true neutral icy white shade, and it's a really nice metallic. I think that this is actually, if I'm correct, this is a highlighter, and I purchased it in the like eyeshadow pan size, which they do give you the option on Kitten Cosmetics to choose the size that you want. But either way, it's a super intense opaque white. So I thought that this would be a really good alternative to Ranch. Okay, so the next shade in the palette I think is called like My Pills or something, and it's a very light kind of creamy tan shade with a little bit of a pink undertone. I went ahead and chose Sorbet from Looxi Beauty, or I feel like there's so many shades like this available. For me, it shows up with a little bit of like a peachy undertone, but I feel like this color, for one, is not really going to show up on a lot of skin tones because it's very light, and if it does show up, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the ending look, but there is Sorbet. Okay, so the next shade in the Conspiracy palette I feel like is a brown that has a little bit of that camely type of shade to it, so I went ahead and chose Desert Sands from Makeup Geek. I really like had my camera and like I opened the picture and zoomed it in all the way, and I kept holding shadows next to the picture and like looking at them, and I felt like this looked very similar to that middle-ish shade in the row. I can't remember what that one was called, honestly. I'm the worst. But this is Desert Sands from Makeup Geek, which is such a nice camely tone. It's not quite as yellow as some other shades in this color family. It's a little bit more of a warm, like true warm shade, but it's a nice color for sure. So the next shade is another warm brown, and it's a little bit deeper. I went ahead and chose Sidekick from Makeup Geek. So there's what that one looks like. I kind of went back and forth between Sidekick and Cocoa Bear, but I feel like either will give you a nice warm crease. Okay, so the next shade in the palette is like this interesting kind of light golden shade, but it's almost more on the neutral side. It's an interesting color, and like I said, I don't have that many neutrals. I went through all of my singles like 3 times trying to find something close to it, and I ended up just deciding to go with Vintage Champagne from Vanessa's Vanity. I guess I can just pull it out like I have for the other colors. So this is a really pretty color, and it's actually pretty interesting because it is a light color that has a little bit of like a golden bronzy base to it, and then it almost looks like it shifts to a silver. It's very interesting. It ends up swatching out very neutral, and it has a really beautiful texture to it. I really like Vanessa's Vanity's eyeshadows. So there's what Vintage Champagne looks like. I feel like this is a little bit more silvery than the color in the Conspiracy palette. That might just be a little bit more golden, and this is not a perfect dupe for sure. This is the one of those ones I kept going back and forth, just looking through my collection, just wishing something else would show up that would match it a little bit closer. For me, that's not a shade I would reach for a lot either way, but I don't know. I tried to do my best. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they said that perfectionism is the enemy of progression. So I'm trying to remember that. Alright, so the next shade in the palette is the last on the top row, and it's kind of an interesting, like deep brown, dirty color, but it has almost like a satin finish to it from what I could tell. So I went ahead and chose Rustic from Sydney Grace Cosmetics, which I felt like was a really good alternative. It's a brown shade, but it's definitely more on the neutral side. It doesn't pull very warm. Almost maybe a little bit on the cool tone side, but it has a really satin finish to it, and it's very thick and intense, and just overall a really good satin shadow formula. Alright, so the next shade is Conspiracy, and I went back and forth on this for a while because it looks very different depending on which picture you look at. Some pictures it looks like a super light green, and then I went back and I looked at the swatches and it looked just like a plain old gold, and I feel like it's somewhere in between. It's like a lighter gold with a green undertone. So the closest I could get, and I feel like this shade ended up matching this swatches pretty well, is the shade Urbane from Looxi Beauty. I'm like crossing my fingers and my toes that this is still available. It's probably not, knowing Looxi. Sometimes their shadows are like, I don't know, they have a lot of stuff either out of stock or limited edition or no longer available, so I never know what to say. Try not to focus too much on whether something is still available, because it's like this internal battle of the whole point of this video is to shop your own stash and find your own dupes and look at what you already own. But then again, if you are watching this just hoping to dupe one shade and it happens to be this shade, I would like to be able to provide an alternative, a dupe, so I don't know. I go back and forth on this every single time, but at the end of the day, if I have two shadows and one is closer and it's not available, I'm probably still going to choose that one to mention. So there's Urbane. Alright, the next shade in the palette is Pigment, which makes me laugh. I love a good pun, and it's kind of like a peachy shade with a pink undertone. And I noticed that because after I'd already completely duped the entire palette, they posted the professional pictures and it looked so much more pink, and I was like, dang it. But in the true daylight pictures, it looks so much more peach. So that's what I decided to go with. Like, I swear, if you hold this little shadow up next to my phone and zoom all the way in, they look the exact same. So I'm just going with it. This is best case scenario from Colourpop. Again, not sure if this is still available. You never know with Colourpop. But it is a really beautiful peachy shade, and it just seems to match the color in the palette really, really well. Just the right undertones, kind of like a muted peach leaning on the pinky side, not too crazy. Alright, so the next shade in the palette is probably my favorite, and it's a really beautiful like neon yellowy green. Definitely leaning more on the yellow side, and I did go through my singles and try to do this the best I could. I wound up choosing Glaminatrix Cosmetics Algae, which is a very greeny yellow, and it does have like a really neon aspect to it. It has a nice amount of yellow. I will say I don't feel like it pulls as yellow as the shade in the actual palette. Unfortunately, I actually just bought a shadow that reminds me a lot of that from Terra Moon Cosmetics last month, and my order hasn't come yet, unfortunately, or else I would probably be mentioning that shade. However, here is Algae. So I feel like it will blend it out, give you a similar look. And I also just wanted to take a moment and shout out a palette that I feel like a lot of people have. If you are eyeing this one color, the Tribe from Juvia's Place has the shade called Masai, and I think that would be a really, really close shade to the Shane Dawson one. I also know a lot of people don't have this one because it's a much smaller brand, but the Paulina Blush Tribe palette has a shade called Friends, which I think again would be a very similar alternative in case you are looking for one to that color. So the next shade in the palette I believe is named Trish, after Trisha, I want to say like Paytas or Paytas. I don't even know how to pronounce her last name. I don't watch her videos. She's very, very controversial. Does anyone else remember watching her on America's Got Talent before she even had a YouTube channel, when she tried out to sing and she was crazy? Because that's my like first memory of a YouTuber ever, even though she wasn't a YouTuber at that point. Anyways, I know a lot of people really don't like her, so I'm kind of wondering if they're kicking themselves for naming the shade Trish, but probably not. They probably don't care. I don't know, but I went ahead and chose Flower Petal from Emme Cosmetics, which is a really, really beautiful, just bright, true pink. It's what I have all over my lid today, and I thought it would be a good alternative. Alright, so the next shade in the palette is a really bright matte orange, so I went ahead and chose Shhhhhhh from Looxi. It always makes me laugh saying this name. I feel like I'm rambling, but I just chose it because I felt like it was bright orange. Alright, next to that, the last shade in the second row is a super bright matte red, and I also chose something from Looxi. This is the shade Cherry Kiss. This is one of their newer mattes, and it is a super, super pigmented bright red. So if you're looking for a true red, definitely would recommend this one. It's incredibly like pigmented and just intense. Like, look at that. Definitely does feel a little bit on the drier side, but that's really what to expect with a bright red like that. Alright, so on to the third and final row. The first shade is a really interesting kind of light, minty, seafoamy type of matte color. I don't know, I was super drawn to that one, and I knew that I have several versions of that in my collection. I went ahead and chose Checkmate from Colourpop because I felt like that was the most similar. I also feel like a lot of people used to talk about this shadow when it first launched, so I was hoping that, you know, if you were interested in this shade, that maybe some people already own it. If this isn't available anymore, I do believe that Jay Cosmetics has two different colors similar to this. They have one that might be called like Sea Foam, and then one that's like Sea something. They have two different ones. One leans a little bit more blue, one leans a little bit more green. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if you are looking for other alternatives, I would recommend those. I do like the Cine Grace matte formula overall, but I just felt like this shade, Checkmate, was very similar to the undertones and how the shade looked in Shane's palette. Alright, so the next shade is a true light silver. Looks like it would be relatively easy to dupe, but my single shadow collection, like I said, lacking on silver, so I just went ahead and chose Game Changer from Colourpop because that was the only shade I had that was somewhat close. The next shade in the palette, I think it might have originally been called Controversy, but I don't know what the name ended up being. It's like a very deep kind of pinky purple tone, and at first I thought it was kind of eggplant, but then I went back and looked at the swatches and I decided to go ahead and do Cascade from Lethal Cosmetics. It kills me just a little bit to do one square pan in a palette of circles, but this color was the one that was the most similar, and I do really enjoy the Lethal Cosmetics formula, so I feel like this was a good alternative. It does look, I feel like it looks a little bit lighter in the pan, but it does have a really good amount of depth to it, and it just has that perfect combination of like a deep pinky purple matte. So the next shade in the palette is an interesting kind of deeper silver, but in some lighting it almost looked like it had just a touch of a green undertone. So because I don't have that many silvers, I took that green undertone and I ran with it. I have this really interesting shade called Peridot from Amy Hearts Beauty, and it's, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of like a silvery type of shade, but more, it has a greenness to it. It's an interesting color, and I felt like it kind of went with the palette, and it was basically as close as I was gonna get. So see, that doesn't look that different. Like, I feel like that doesn't look that bad. It looks kind of similar. All right, so the next shade in the palette is a really cool color that it's like a basically like a blackish base duochrome with a tealy green shift. I feel like I've been seeing these more on the mainstream market, but I think a lot of us have seen them in singles for a while. And actually, when I was pulling out my single shadows, I normally like to go ahead and I'll just like do like a preliminary round where I just pull out shades that I feel like are similar, and I'll line them up in rows, and then I'll go through and I'll swatch all of them next to each other, and I'll kind of look at the swatches and the pans and the pictures, and I'll choose. And sometimes I only have one option, and sometimes I have 10 options, and this is one of those where I had like 6 different options that I felt like were similar. So I ended up choosing this shade because I felt like it was the most close in color and background and finish, but there are a lot of colors out there now that I feel like are similar to this. So I went ahead and chose Secret Garden from Makeup Geek, which I believe is from their duochrome collection. I feel like people used to go so hard for this shade, and as you can see, it kind of has that black base with that kind of tealy green shift to it. I felt like the finish of this looked pretty similar. So there is Makeup Geek Secret Garden. I feel like you can see the color better on my hand. This is not the most ideal swatching location, but I was trying to get all 18 swatches. So I kind of went back and forth on the last shade. I couldn't tell if it was a deep matte black or a really deep matte blue, but I ended up just going with a deep matte black, and this is Makeup Geek Corrupt. This is my go-to for any time there's a black shade because I'm pretty sure this is the only matte black single shadow that I own, but I really like it. It's very pigmented. It's definitely a little bit on the drier side, like super dry, but the pigmentation is crazy. Like, that's like barely touching it. Like, look at that. So there is Makeup Geek Corrupt. So here are all the swatches from my version of the palette. I do like how it turned out. I think that it's an interesting color scheme. I don't really own anything like it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I saw a comparison of this to the Anastasia Prism palette, which I never owned, and a palette from Charity, which I didn't own either. So I don't know. I haven't really owned anything like this. I think that it's kind of interesting how it went from like a row of warm tones, a row of pops of color, and then basically like a row of cool tones. So I think that that was an interesting way to sort it out. And when I was trying to decide on what look to do with this palette, I did feel inspired and a little overwhelmed because I was like, I don't know where to start. Like, I kind of want to do like a green eye. I want to do like really warm tones. I kind of wanted to pull neutral. So I tried to get like the overall color story on my eyes and pick a little bit from each section. But I do think it's a cool color story, and I'll probably end up keeping my little palette together in case I do see anyone do any looks with the Conspiracy palette and I want to recreate it myself. Then it'll be super easy to do without having any FOMO. Alright, so that's pretty much everything I have to say about the palette. Let's go ahead and jump on into the tutorial. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and start off with Looxi Sorbet. And I'm going to start that off into my crease as my transition shade. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take Best Coast Scenario from Colourpop. And I'm going to pop it a little bit lower in my crease. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take Cascade from Lethal Cosmetics, and I'm going to pop that onto my outer V. I'm mostly just packing this shade on first, and then I'm going to go ahead and blend with my previous brush. Alright, so I'm just going to go back and forth between my two brushes and blend that out. I'm going to go back into a touch more of Best Coast Scenario. Just throw that over top of the crease. Alright, now I'm going to dip into a touch of Makeup Geek Corrupt. I'm going to use that to deepen up the outer V just a little bit. I'm also going to go ahead and take a touch more of Corrupt on a pencil brush, and I'm going to start that off on the outer part of my lower lash line. Just connecting. Alright, so that's a little intense. Might have gone in with a touch more than I meant to, but I'm going to go ahead and take Secret Garden now from Makeup Geek, and I'm going to pop that onto the middle of my lid, or sorry, the middle of my lower lash line. I'm going to go ahead and go into Checkmate from Colourpop, and I'm going to pop that onto the very front of my lower lash line, blending it into the other colors, hoping to kind of brighten it up a little bit. This is my first time using this pencil brush. It's ginormous, and I think you can tell that it's ginormous by how much eyeshadow I have underneath my eyes. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take Flower Petal from Emme Cosmetics. I'm just going to use my finger because that's how I like to apply shimmers, but I'm going to go ahead and throw that all over my lid. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and take Duchess from Kitten Cosmetics, and I'm going to start off by popping that in my inner corner, and then I'm going to throw it onto my lid and blend it into the pink. So just going to take a touch of that white shade Duchess and pop it underneath my brow bone for a little bit of a highlight. For some reason, I'm really drawn to throw orange in my waterline, so I'm going to go ahead and use Linda Halberry Likeable Mood pencil. And then I'm also going to finish off with the Too Faced Better Than Sex mascara, and I'll be right back. So here's the look with mascara and the liner thrown into my waterline. I do really like it. I think that it would be so pretty with lashes, but I'm too lazy to be honest. So really quickly to finish off this look, I'm going to use the Jay Cosmetics highlighter in the shade Stethno, which is like a lighter whitey gold. So for lips, I already went ahead and lined with the lip liner in Backseat Love from Morphe, and it's still on mostly. I just lined my lips and I was kind of messing around with my shape a little bit, and then I threw on a balm, and the balm has basically wore off at this point, but the lip liner is still there, so I figured I'd go ahead and use a gloss. I'm going to use shade 27 from Glaminatrix Cosmetics. Alright, so this is the finished look and everything for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed the dupes and found them helpful. If you like my content and you haven't subscribed already, I'd be so happy if you would subscribe, and just joyful to have you here watching my videos, which is the reason why I put them out. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!